Welcome to the Sellosophy podcast. Now, why do we call it Sellosophy? Because it's a combination of the words sales and philosophy. I'm excited today to have a really special guest join us, Moeed Amin from the proverbial door. This is someone who I actually ran into while listening to podcasts. Actually, Moeed, I don't know if I mentioned to you, but I heard you from the Sales Hacker podcast, and I think the title was Ways to Build Trust with Buyers, which is super interesting. We're going to go into, but let me tell you a little bit about Moeed. My favorite thing about him is in LinkedIn, everybody has a tagline. His tagline is, I am not a tagline. And I think that's absolutely phenomenal. And so we can expand on that shortly. Lives in London, owns a company called The Proverbial Door, where they help specific companies, C-level executives with 1 billion plus companies scale in the software industry. And Moeed, you can correct any of that stuff if I get anything wrong. But you weren't a natural born seller, and you decided to get into it because of your background in neuroscience. And so I'm super excited to have you. And was there anything in that introduction that I may have missed you would like to add?
Just a couple of things to add there, actually. So Proverbial Door, we're about training and helping people become more confident and more skillful persuaders. So some of that is sales, people in the sales profession. Some of that are and the area that I particularly specialize in is working with people with a STEM background or STEM skill set or education, and helping them overcome the fear and the misconception of persuasion. So science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So we work with people in very key moments in their lives. So those key moments could be for a founder, it could be pitching for investment. For a salesperson, there are multiple key moments. We're even working with people in R&D because a big part of their innovation agenda, they have to be able to persuade stakeholders in their business to commit to an innovative idea, particularly if they're big ones. So whether that's time, resource, money, etc. So we help them learn how to persuade people so that they're better able to create momentum. So yeah, those are a couple of things that I would add about what we're doing here in Proverbial Door. But apart from that, yeah, you got it right. And I wasn't really intended to go into sales, and I was struggling in it. And then I kind of, through a serendipitous event, realized that actually I've been thinking about this all wrong. There's been no training. There's been a lot of training about what we think salespeople should do, but very little at that time, and even quite little now. But back into early 2000s, 2006, 2007, very little training on how to think about the buyer's perspective and what mechanisms they go through when it comes to how they make decisions, and how do we kind of reverse engineer and work backwards from that to adapt our sales process in the best way. So yeah, it's been an unusual journey to where we are now, but thoroughly enjoyed both the ups and the downs.
Yeah, and an interesting one. And I think you serve a market that I think desperately needs, these skill sets, because as I think about the discipline that you are focused on, these are folks who didn't grow up thinking they have to persuade people. They're just really good at their job. And when they start realizing that every decision is made through, being educated, being formally communicating effectively, being able to present the value of that decision, and mitigate risks, right? Because I think a lot of people decide or don't decide based on either fear, greed, right? It's emotional. And so I think we can obviously deepen that. And I think that's where the neuroscience and understanding how buyers think is important. I decided to call this episode Selling in 2023. And you have plenty of wealth of knowledge around so many areas in the world of sales. But I'm just thinking about all of this stuff that's coming down the pike, especially with something like ChatGPT and AI and technology taking over and automating a lot of processes. And I think about what role will it play in sales. So I kind of want to get the elephant in the room and ask you, from your point of view, is AI going to replace salespeople?
The answer is both yes and no. Let's start with the yes. They won't replace. Maybe they will in the future, but we are decades away from that happening. The technology is just not there, right, to replace salespeople in its entirety and take over the full sales process. Even if the technology was there, which will still take decades, it's not just about the minds of people when it comes to how technology interacts with our society. It's also the hearts of the individual. So even if the technology is there and there is a robot or a software platform that you can interface with through your laptop or whatever the interface or the hardware is, our hearts have not caught up. So, it will take a longer time for people to feel comfortable to do business with a robot or with a platform, especially if there is no human to human element behind that. And so there is another part of the yes, which is, and it's almost kind of connected to no, which is AI and technology. We saw this in the Industrial Revolution, right? With the advent of mass production of machines and warehouses and factories, etc., there was no longer the need for a vast number of skill sets that were seen as low skilled. But it's low skilled because they were able to replace them by the newest technology, which was the mass production of those machines back in the Industrial Revolution. The same is happening here. But instead of the entirety of the sales process, what is happening is that you're seeing low value or almost commoditized approaches within sales are being replaced by technology. And so that is where I constantly talk about the need to be a better salesperson. If you are, and I'm going to use this term, and if it offends people, I'm sorry, but it's absolutely true. If you're just a phone monkey and you're making $100 a day with no intelligence behind that, no thought about who you're speaking with, no preparation, and if you're just doing that, you're going to be replaced by technology. And even if there is a human component to that technology, right? So, automated dialing systems, chat GBT that you might use to basically craft the right pitch, for example. Those two on its own, and there are loads of others, but those two on its own, a CFO is going to look at that at some point and say, well, why are we hiring expensive graduates to do that role? Actually, all the technology is there that's giving them the tools to do so. Why not just hire cheaper, lower skilled workers that can do that role? So there's always going to be the risk. And what we're seeing now is bigger parts of the sales process are being replaced or partially replaced by these technologies. Now, why I say no as well. So that's the yes part. The no part's very interesting because actually smart salespeople are realizing that the technology is not really there to replace what I'm doing, maybe parts of it, but actually what it can do is vastly enhance what I'm doing. And in fact, that's going to give me a substantial edge over anyone else, right? So I'm going to leverage technology that will help me dial faster, for example. But the important side is the intelligence behind that. So I'm going to leverage technology that will tell me the intent of the buyer, when they're considering making a purchase, when they are thinking about making a change in their business, information around the social psychographic nature of that individual, so that I'm crafting and using words that are actually going to be relatable to them. These are technologies and platforms and tools out there that will help elevate and raise the bar of the conversations that I'm having with buyers. So there are a lot of salespeople out there that see technology as an incredible opportunity to help them actually conduct their sales in a far better way and really give themselves an unfair competitive advantage. So in short, no, we're not there yet. It's going to take decades for that to happen, both from a hearts and minds perspective. But yes, if you're basically stuck in the old system of sales and you're not really keeping up with buyer requirements, and I talk a lot about that, then you're going to find big parts of your sales process will become commoditized, and therefore your value to the employer and to your buyers will become commoditized as well.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. And as I hear you say so many things, I mentally took note, and I had to write down a few things because there are so many things that resonated with me. And I think you going back to what happened with the Industrial Revolution made some incredible points. When the car came out, a lot of people, in the horse world industry, and I don't know what the proper term is, but, everybody was fearful that, all of these jobs were going to become obsolete. What ended up happening? Highways came along, gas stations came along, auto repair shops, a whole ecosystem kind of was developed as a result of the invention of the car. as I think about AI, there are things that even in our imagination cannot think about that's going to create prompt engineers or random jobs that we don't know that don't exist yet that I think will, some things will be replaced. And then you talked about, yeah, low value tasks, I think can definitely be extremely useful to be efficient at a lot of things. But I think what it's not going to get better at is the person's effectiveness. Because I think as sales become a lot more complex, it's harder for, you know, a robot, to your point, or a machine to help persuade or execute the art of the conversation. So I think, to your point, just to help emphasize some really great points that you made, is I think about efficiency versus effectiveness. And then I also think about art versus science, right? And I think the science and the efficiency will probably help tremendously, especially if you're in complex sales like the world that you're in and the world that I'm in. It's going to take a long time before that could be automated. So fantastic. Any final thoughts on that before we move into another topic I know you're passionate about?
Yeah, one final thought, and Darwin's misquoted a lot of times when it comes to this. You know, there's going to be progress every time, and you want that progress to happen, right? Otherwise, we're going to stagnate. The quality of your life will be no better than the quality of your grandparents, right? It's not the strongest or most intelligent that survive, but rather those that are most adaptable to change. Now, think about that for a moment, because he's not saying you have to be strong or smarter. You just got to recognize that there is a change, and you've got to be able to adapt yourself to that. Now, for salespeople that look at certain technologies like Chat GPT, AI, whatever it might be, and there's a whole stack of technologies that you can use, it may be very overwhelming. And you might think that you need to become really familiar and almost an expert at it, but that's not the case. There are people around you who know this stuff very well, and you can contact them and speak with them for them to give you almost a summary, to introduce you to it, to explain it all to you. And so you don't have to do this alone, but you do recognize that you've got to be adaptable to change. And that doesn't mean that you have to adapt in a very big way all of a sudden, but you just got to start to dip your toe in the water and figure out where your resources are. So it's not a lack of resources, it's a lack of resourcefulness. And so start with that. Yeah, well, and then you will slowly get into it, because I'm definitely not as technological savvy as a lot of other people, but I figured out a way that works for me.
Yeah, love that quote. That's from Tony Robbins, I think, right?
Yeah.
I showed just a funny anecdote. I showed the ChatGPT to my dad. I don't even know why I did it. He started going nuts into what do you call that? The pigeon, the black hole of it, and it's hilarious. Just the things that he sends me now via text message. I'd love to transition to a topic I know that you're very well versed in and also passionate about, which is NLP, right? Neuro language processing, neuroscience, behavior, and this was new to me as I wanted to deepen my knowledge into. I knew what it was from, observation, but I never knew to put a label on it. So for those who hear the term NLP for the first time, how do you leverage it? What is it? And what is the impact of understanding the science and the art of executing?
Yeah, I mean, NLP, so neuro-linguistic programming. Now, to be clear, it's pretty advanced stuff. And I have salespeople that come to me and ask me around, can I learn the science of how to read people's minds? I'm like, well, there is no science for that, right? Or can I learn about NLP? But when I talk to them, they haven't even got the fundamentals right. And then they're trying to get to the advanced level. So you cannot really do that unless you get the fundamentals right. And in fact, you'll find that if you do those fundamentals, you may not need NLP necessarily, or at least not as deep as you'd think. But NLP, the way I think about it is, it's the science behind understanding the how and the why of how people think. And I mean, this is a very big topic, but in a nutshell, what it essentially looks at is, through past experiences, knowledge, etc., life experiences, you've built a perception of the world around you. That perception is, or think of it as a prism, right, or a filter, that allows certain stimuli from outside to come in. Your internal reality translates that information to fit in with how you view the world, and more importantly as well, your place within it. And then that drives your behavior. So that's why you will see people with certain levels of, addiction's a difficult one, but there are certain elements of addiction that is explained by NLP. The way that we, behave towards certain scenarios, right? Different people behave in a completely different way towards that scenario and towards the same thing. So that has a lot to do with our experiences, the information we've gathered, etc. It's built up that internal reality. We translate it within our internal reality, and then we act accordingly to that. And there are various examples of that. But that's essentially what NLP is. It's that neuro-linguistic programming. Now, the good news is that by understanding NLP, and this is where a lot of, not a lot, but some life coaches, etc., this is where they lean upon this. They will understand that if you change that person's identity, then you change how that person both perceives things and acts accordingly. And that's a very big part of that. Now, I studied NLP because I was massively interested in this area, but in the sales world, it helps you understand the how and why of the decisions that are being made by your buyers. Why will a CFO look at a solution or what you're discussing in a completely different way to say someone else? Or you might have two different CFOs that would look at it in a very completely different way. And this is the more advanced element of sales, because now you're getting into the root of, I think I can understand now why this person is fixated on this risk or fixated on this problem. Mm-hmm. Or fixated on something about my solution that to me is very minor, but to them it's a big deal. Because they've had a previous experience with someone else where that was the thing that caused the problem, and it caused such a big chain reaction and negative consequences for them that the magnitude and importance of that one thing that logically is that one thing, but emotionally is so huge, is such a big deal for them. So it's, that's kind of in a nutshell how and why I went into NLP.
Yeah. And the techniques and the education you bring to the teams and the application of it helps deepen that example that you said, right? Like, why and how do they think in that nature? How do you unpack it in such a way that it doesn't feel from the buyer as, sales-y, right? What you're doing is you're sort of helping persuade or change that perspective through the art of asking really great questions or positioning certain information to that individual in a way that comes off as they can trust you, which I think brings back to the research that you've done over your 20 years plus of experience, in interviewing buyers. And when you ask them what are the top qualities, the 4 top qualities that they look for in a seller, and you uncovered, from what I see here in my notes, is all they really care about at the end of the day is for them to deliver on promises, help them achieve their objectives or outcomes, be a source of education, and not only help them grow on the business side, but also on the individual side. And so as long as, thanks to that research, I'm sure that you've been able to align a lot of your training, your skill set, and the application of NLP so that it helps satisfy those themes. And so I wanted to follow up on one of those statements, because for me, I think one of the biggest sources of to me, I think being knowledgeable in your field, being an expert, and obviously that showing confidence, I think it gives me at least the upper hand. So out of those 4, that's the one that resonates with me as a way to build trust and build rapport.
So the first thing that we have to look, when you look at the neuroscience, the rewards pathway for learning new information is exactly the same reward pathway for eating sugar. So it's highly reward generative. And for people who are very ambitious, where learning is an incredibly big part of their growth, right? You don't become a C-level executive, for example, without learning a hell of a lot more than you would as a mid-level manager, right? So for them, learning new things is incredibly important. And here is why. Because as humans, we're obsessed with prediction. And if you think about all the valuable technologies out there, yes, it's efficiency, effectiveness, etc. But that's why AI is just so massive. People think of AI as robots and machines, but actually, machine learning and AI, it's more around predicting and being able to make more accurate judgments and therefore actions on things. And we're obsessed with prediction. If you asked someone 50 years ago and showed them that you could actually, showed them that you can actually predict the weather the next day by just an app on your phone, something you put in your pocket, they'll probably think you're a witch. They'll think, who the hell is this person, right? So we're obsessed by that. And people value valuable information that they receive from someone that opens up their world. And so C-level buyers, etc., if you help them see around corners, right? So these are things that either they are unaware of or things that they are aware of, but they miscalculated the impact or the direction of those things. If you help them see those things and do so credibly and it's relevant, then your standing with them will instantly elevate. And one of the most incredible things that I've observed, and salespeople, particularly young salespeople, have this imposter syndrome, especially when they're speaking with senior people. And I'm here to say to them that you don't need to feel that imposter syndrome, and here's why. If you sell to a chief technology officer or a CMO or a VP of sales or whatever it is, I can almost guarantee you, right? There's always exceptions, but I can almost guarantee you that you speak with more people in that role in a week than your buyers speak with their peers in probably half a year to a year, depending on the level of activity. So let's play it safe and say you speak with more. If you sell to a VP of marketing, you speak to more VP of marketing in 1 month than that VP of marketing does with their own peers in a whole year. The wealth of information and understanding that you have at your disposal from your sheer experience is far more. And therefore, you have insights that the VP of marketing will absolutely value. The question is how you view that information and how you understand the role of that person and what they struggle with. So education is really important. And time again, I had, of the 428 buyers that I interviewed, a large number of them kept saying to me that one of the indicators of a valuable time with a salesperson was if they learned something new that was relevant, that was timely, that was valuable, and that was actionable. So that is why I talk about education. And for a lot of buyers, they may buy from you initially because of other factors, not just education, but other factors. But what was really interesting was that the proportion of importance for education shifted higher when it came to the relationship element. So one of the biggest indicators of whether they will continue working with you is not just the ROI, etc., and you've delivered on the outcome, is how much they're continuing to learn from you and learn something that's valuable. And in hard times when the CFO is challenging them on that spend, personal value, what I call emotional value, becomes even more important than business value. It's always important, but it becomes even more important when the pressure is up. And one of the biggest levers of emotional value or personal value for someone is that education element. So that's why it's so important.
Fantastic. Incredible. Yeah. And I hear you talk about that trust building and someone feeling, helping folks see things around the corner. And I remember very early in the sales experience, the light sales experience I had, when something clicked for me, I remember it was, about asking really good questions and uncovering needs and pain points, but asking like what if questions, that the hypothetical, right? Future, desired state, concept questions. And I remember the key word that told me I now trust you, or I now see you as a source of education or someone that can provide value. This was the exact phrase when I realized I got them, right? Not I got them or I earned it, right? I earned their trust, is when they say, I never thought about it that way. Whenever I heard that phrase, that was their open door to say, okay, I welcome your ideas now, right? I welcome you into the conversation. My defense walls is no longer, right? I'm no longer skeptical. Now you've eliminated any doubt of me thinking that you're someone who's coming in with a different intent or a malicious or ill intended, right? It's because once you help someone at least change or persuade them to see something from a different viewpoint, to your point, then you can take a conversation. The conversation becomes a lot easier because now they're at least open-minded to what you have to offer as far as ideas, concepts, approaches, strategic decisions, etc. So as I heard you say that, it brought me back to that memory, and I knew, I was like, that's the moment where I know, okay, now it's going to be, I don't have to like prove myself as much. I think I've done enough of the work. Now let's talk about next steps. Now let's talk about the harder questions, the more in-depth questions. So I got a couple of questions to ask you, and thank you so much for all the value that you're adding. I want to talk about trust. You know, you talk a lot about like how to build trust, but I also think about, as salespeople, there might be a common theme with personalities about being people pleasers, like overly pleasing, right? Or overly trusting. And I just think about what could be some of the risks or dangers. So from your point of view, and as you train, you know, folks in your world, what is the impact of having a sales professional being too trusting, or, you know, a people pleaser, especially if we're like in the world of pricing, negotiation, or even maybe things that are out of scope? So any insights you'd like to share on that?
Okay, well, Carlos, the first thing we've got to clarify here is the definition of, you know, trust is not the same as being a people pleaser. So let's help people, you know, get that clear in their minds, right? Your path to establishing trust with a buyer does not mean you doing everything that they want you to do, right? You become a pushover. And in fact, they're not going to trust you because they'll just think, well, this person is just going to do anything I ask them to. There's no challenging element to what they're saying, right? And then how do I know that they're not rolling over on other things that's then therefore harming me? So actually you break down trust even more. So let's get clear about that. That is not the same thing. Trust is where, now there's a guy called Daryl Stickle who wrote he's part of our partnership group. He wrote his PhD thesis on building trust in hostile environments. And trust is where, you know, uncertainty, you know, vulnerability and integrity are involved. Now, to create trust with a buyer, there are a few things that you have to really be aware of. And there are 7 stages. There are seven elements to the characteristic of a trustworthy person. It was Stephen Covey, the guy that wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He once wrote that trust is where competence and character converge, right? So it's the skill set as well as the character of the individual. So let's talk about the character, because that's the one that people are usually obsessed about. And I did a lot of work around this. So authenticity is the first one out the 7, right? So are you authentic? Does the person feel that you're authentic? Are you speaking and living your truth, right? Consistency is the next one, right? So I may show you love, care, and attention when I'm trying to court you and win your deal, but do I still show that same love, care, and attention after I've won the deal and I have your money, and therefore, you know, and then the relationship is going on now? Or do I show you that love, care, and attention when I'm asking you for a renewal, but for the other 10 or 11 months, I'm nowhere to be found? So consistency is really important. Integrity, no need to explain that one further. We know what that is. Responsibility or accountability. So does the person feel that I feel accountability towards them? If I make a promise on something, do I feel accountable that we're going to deliver on that? Do I feel accountable enough that I'm going to move things in our business that may be in the way for our relationship or for you to achieve your outcome? And am I going to feel that accountability that I'm actually going to do something about it? The other one is generosity. So that's really important. Um, what's interesting is when I did my research, I found that if you try to only use generosity, then actually you build up cynicism rather than trust, because people think, why are they being so generous? What are they looking to get for in return? But a healthy amount of generosity, in addition to the others, is very, very powerful. Um, Guilt worthiness is a big one. So this was taken from research in the University of Chicago, I believe. But if I feel that you're going to feel guilty about something, guilt is a pathway to integrity and therefore to trust. But if I feel that you're someone who's guilt free, doesn't have guilt in terms of their actions, particularly past actions, obviously, then I'm less likely going to trust you, because you're probably not going to have any problems or qualms about screwing me over, right? And then the final one's agreeableness. Now, this is not being a rollover. This is agreeableness. Think of it as empathy. It is about understanding the perspective of the person and offering an alternative perspective, not by being forceful and saying you're wrong or throwing data at you to prove you wrong, but by understanding where you're coming from and why you have that opinion. And rather than forcefully changing that, it's actually agreeing with you in terms of perspective and then gently offering you a different perspective, right? And there's a psychological and neuroscience element to that, where loads of studies were conducted where they were trying to convince people of a different alternative, and we found that if you just use data to the contrary of someone's opinion, their thalamus is going to block that out because it doesn't fit in with their world. But if you agree with someone initially, you've created a connection, right? You've lighted up a couple of areas in the brain, ventral striatum and insula, just to basically say, do you know what? This person understands me. This person gets what I'm talking about, rather than something else. And so those are kind of the 7 elements of the characteristic of trustworthiness. And what I typically ask people is, how would you rate yourself on all 7 of those things, genuinely? And then the next question I would ask them is, if you were to give that form or that questionnaire to your buyers, how would they rate you and why? So yeah, that's and the reason why trust was so important is, of the 428 buyers, 100% of them, 100%, not 90%, not 99, 100% of them, when asked, why they purchased from a particular salesperson or vendor versus another, 100% of them use the word trust or honesty or both in their answers. And so if 100% of them are saying that, then it's clearly something that's really important. And what's interesting is there's a lot of research that says buyers, 40% of buyers, for example, feel that sales profession is untrustworthy. And so there is a big gap between what buyers really want and what will make them buy from you versus what they're experiencing from the sales profession as a whole.
Yeah. And so many great points. And I think to the last statement you said, it's also about the sales professional changing that narrative internally, because easily when they get into the world, and they could easily be convinced that that buyer perception is the reality that they have to overcome. I think they have to internally believe these, getting themselves to practice these 7 elements so that they could dispel that myth or that perception. Because marketing, movies, and other influences have positioned a salesperson as, the first thing that comes to mind for me is car dealership or sleazy, or coming with an ulterior motive, because many of those infrastructures or even just old frameworks, it's kind of like 80s, 90s stuff, right? And I think we've evolved as humans, some not as much, but in the profession, I think every day people are selling, whether they like it or not, or think they are or they aren't. And the people that I coach, they tell me very directly, I'm an accountant, I'm not a salesperson. I'm like, you're a salesperson. You don't know it, but you are. You've sold since the day you were born, right? You're persuading people every day on making decisions, or you are also making decisions every single day. And it's just helping, to your point, reshape their perception of what the world of that is. And once they accept, for me at least, selling to me is the same as helping, right? For me, is if you're coming in from a place of wanting to do, of servitude, right? That you want to serve someone, you want to make their world better, you want to contribute to society. You know, if your purpose is aligned with wanting to help, wanting to make a positive impact, then selling is just a vessel to be able to achieve that. And it's the application of some of these gifts or skills that some humans have to be able to help other humans. And this is, I think, our mission, yours and mine, and many others, to be able to communicate that to the world and dispel some of those myths. So I think these are super valuable.
No,
So thanks for sharing that.
all really, really good points that you shared there, Carlos. And what I would add to that is, unfortunately, it's not really just the salespeople that have perpetuated this problem. It's actually the people above them. It's the investors, the founders, the leaders of those businesses. Actually, there are a lot of salespeople that desperately want to live a principled life. They don't want to feel as if they are tricking their buyers. They don't want to act with a lack of integrity. However, they are pressured in a very big way and forced to do so just by this sheer idiocracy of how investors and founders and some of the leaders actually treat those salespeople, and the metrics that they use, the reward systems that they use, etc. It forces salespeople to have to act in that way or lose their job. And so it's not just a salesperson thing here. I'm not saying it's 100% those leaders. Of course, we have a responsibility as well. And like you said, the movies have perpetuated this and perpetuated what great sales looks like, which is really rubbish. And then you have, people who, perpetuate this as well, right? The Grant Cardones of the world. I'm sorry, but that's just not how you sell. That is not how someone buys. So yeah, what you say is spot on. And the example you gave of the accountant, sales is a form of communication that communicates the value of something that you have to offer, right? Or a perspective about yourself, or perception about yourself. The accountant may not feel they're a salesperson, but by delivering their work or doing the work for someone, they're selling the quality of their work and the quality of the relationship that they have with their clients. If you do bad work, you are communicating a certain level of quality. If you're doing great work, you're communicating another set of quality. And so they might not think that they're salespeople because they're not speaking about it and not trying to sell to someone. But the sheer act of the delivery of their work is a form of selling, because it's a form of communication about your quality and therefore your value. So yeah, all great points that you've shared, Carlos.
Yeah, I'll share a final story, and I'll try to make this as short as possible because I know that we're pressed on time here. To your point about founders and CEOs and executives creating reward systems that create the terrible behavior that result in a poor customer experience or unethical
and management
practices.
style and expectations as well, right? So yeah.
Yeah, just the whole culture, the whole framework of it. I worked under that. So I worked for a bank that had a ridiculously stupid goal system with a ridiculously stupid payout and reward system. I would tell you, man, bankers were asked, and you probably may have read articles about Wells Fargo's scam with fake credit cards and fake accounts. Guess what? I was part of that, right? And so what happened was there was a lot of bad apples that were figuring out how to game the system, right? So the goals that they had were so stupid. It wasn't even like sell as many cars as you can. It was like sell more accounts or sell more widgets. And I guess their science behind it, some really smart guy came to these executives and said, if we attach more of these ancillary items, these debit cards, savings accounts, personal loans, credit cards, etc., then the likelihood of a relationship in the bank will last X amount more, right? If we get more minor savings accounts, those people that turn 18 will likely choose that same bank as their first bank to take their college loan, mortgage, whatever. So like they've sold them on this idea of, if we create a incentive system based on, they were called solutions. So that was the actual sales unit that we had to hit. How many solutions will you have today? So every morning in a huddle in a bank, the manager would say, how many checking accounts are we going to open today? How many solutions are we going to sell today? And so it created this pressure, because they had a daily goal for people to harass their friends and their family to open a second account. And they started getting creative of saying, open this account for your Amazon purchases, open this account for whatever. And these customers, it was just so terrible. I was a district manager at that point, and I had all these crazy goals. And this is weird to say, I was the only person who did not hit my goal, because I was trying to do it the ethical way, right? And it was there was so much pressure on me. I felt this conflict inside of me, right? This burning, just a hatred towards the system, but also like beating myself up because I'm not good enough or whatever. Like it was really affecting my self-esteem, because it's my first time being a sales leader with all this crazy pressure. I ended up stepping down and transitioning to a position that was more of a coach rather than the actual manager, because I just couldn't take the pressure. And then a year or two later, the scandal comes out, right? And no goals for anybody, no more goals or anything. But just having gone through that experience myself, it was just a traumatic, number one, but also it gave me so much perspective on understanding what happens when you irresponsibly carry out, a sales approach, and how many people lives it impacts. Fast forward, the pandemic took place, and I had to take a different role inside the bank, where I helped underwrote this. In the U.S., they gave out these loans called the PPP loans, and it was
we had that in the UK as well.
And I had to, right? I'm sure many countries came up with something similar. And just to shorten this, I ended up underwriting a lot of those, because they had to take resources from the bank to help underwrite this for small business owners. And I remember calling so many people who were angry that couldn't get access to getting the loan and the funds, and how many of them were victims of that. And I was just so ashamed, that I represented a company that did that. And I know many do that as well. But I wanted just to share that anecdote, because I just want to put an extra 1,000 exclamation points to that statement that you said about the irresponsibility of leadership and what an impact it can have, especially for such a large organization. So
and I'm sorry that you had to go through that experience, but I would also wager that you came out a better person with more knowledge and understanding about
I'm grateful for the experience coming out of it, because of the good that I can do, thanks to the negative impact it had on me and folks in my
and it's a hard experience to have to go through, and I'd love to sit here and say I wish we didn't have to go through such experiences. I too have gone through some really horrible experiences in terms of the professional growth, but sometimes the best lessons are the most hardest ones, as long as you survive, right? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? And so
sometimes things happen for you.
Exactly. And I think another Tony Robbins quote, and that's absolutely true. And that's the beauty of this, right? Which is in sales, whatever profession you're in, the meaning that you take from that experience. And what I'm saying here is not just psychological. This is neuroscience, right? I mean, like when we do brain scans and when we look at the structure of the brain, we can actually see the parts of the brain that do that. The meaning that you take from this, because all life is a biochemical experience at the end of the day. So the specific types of biochemical reactions and what you're seeing and what you're observing, and then the meaning that you take from those things has a complete impact on how you view the world around you, right? You will have two people that take completely different meanings from the same experience. And so that is a big part of the resilience that's required in sales. When you get a rejection, yes, it feels bad, but what meaning are you going to take from that? There are some people, and I had to learn this the hard way, there are some people that will become so disheartened by it, and it will affect them for a while. And there are those that, look, you feel disheartened, but then you have a pattern interrupt. You break that pattern by asking a question, by the way. Questions are beautiful. You break that pattern by asking yourself a question or making a statement about something. And then you ask yourself a better quality question, which is, okay, well, what did I learn from this? And how can I take that learning to improve what I'm doing in the future? And so it's the same thing. So it's a shame we had to go through that, but equally I'm actually probably glad, because I think you're the person who you are now because of that experience. And if you hadn't have gone through
Absolutely.
that,
it gives me so much insight, certainty, confidence. To your point, the ability to not be agreeable to certain things because of the experience that I had, and I know what the negative effect or impact it could have on the stakeholders associated with it. Moeed, I've taken so much of your time. This has been a phenomenal interaction, and I've gotten so many golden sound bites out of you that I think will be on repeat in my head, but also I think for our listeners today. So thank you so much. I would love to see if you can share briefly how folks can get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you, your business.
Sure. I mean, I'm all over the place. So one of the first things you can do is connect with me on LinkedIn. So /Moeed Amin. I'm regularly engaging with people on there. So I actually respond to pretty much most of any messages that are sent to me. And so just let them know that, just type in that you heard me on Sellosophy, and then we'll be able to engage. You can also check out my website, so www.proverbialdoor.com. And we talk about all the things that we do there. There's a ton of content, and you can also subscribe to a newsletter. We have over 1,000 people now in that newsletter, and it's growing. And I also have my own podcast and shows. So on YouTube, it's Proverbial Door, where we talk about sales. We also analyze the financial statements of company, because financial acumen is a very big deal and a very missing part of sales skills. That's important. And you can also go to our podcast, which is Persuasion Lab. And again, you can hear from some folks around the world who are incredible experts at what they do, from body language to even functional medicine. We talk about all those things that help you as a salesperson or professional.
Phenomenal. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for the value you added today. And thanks everybody for listening in. And until next time.